Hey everybody, my name is Lon Stroshine, former public company executive turned best-selling author, coach to elite performers, and self-declared lifestyle engineer. In 2022, I made a decision that changed everything for me. I left my job as a public company executive, and I left without a backup plan, without a resume, and without a Rolodex of clients. I left with a belief that the best days of my life were right in front of me, and that they weren't going to be lived where I was standing. Since that day, my mission has become to be a champion for the best decade of your life. This podcast is here to give you the tools, the stories, and the perspective you're going to need to finally make a bet on you. We're going to talk about the hard stuff here. The conversations here will be raw and real. There are no post-edits, no do-overs, and no limits. You'll hear stories from people just like you who've made the trade, and from those who are right there in the trenches, right where you are, still trying to figure out. If you're here, you're ready to be up to something. And if you're here, you're one decision away from a radically different life. Welcome to the Normal 40. I'm going to see all of you on the podcast. So here we go. So look, I'll just warn you, everything we could talk about from this moment on probably is going to be part of the podcast. How do you feel about that?
Fair warning. Hey, duly warned.
You've been duly warned. There is no turning back now. So a little bit of a backstory that, of course, you know, and I know, but anybody who's listening doesn't know. You are my physician for FAA physicals, which is pretty cool. And I met you not all that long ago, a matter of a few months ago, because I went to get my, I did class 3. Is that what I got? Class 3 medical? Class 3 medical?
Yes.
And I went to the person I normally have gone to for the last 20 years. And I called and I said, can I get in with you? And they said, yes, it will be 4.5 months. And I'm like, well, what? That doesn't seem right. So a buddy of mine who's a pilot said, hey, look, there's somebody who's kind of new to the market. I can't speak for her, but here's her name and contact information. So I'm like, all right, thanks. And I called your office thinking maybe I'll talk to your staff. Maybe I'll leave a message, not sure. And you answered. And I'm like, well, what the heck? I had to wait 4.5 months to get to the other guy. And you answered your phone when I called you. So I'm like, we are onto something here. So fast forward, you didn't know me. I didn't know you. It was just kind of a business relationship where I needed a class 3 medical to fly and you take pilots through that. And in the course of the examination, we got talking about life and things and obviously talking about being pilots. And you had some crew chairs in your foyer that you were working on. And then you started asking me about what I do, and we started talking about the trade and my book and what it is. And before we got done, realized, we have a lot to probably chat about sometime. And that's the last time we've talked. And here we are.
Here we are. And I bought your book and read it on the plane when I was going on vacation in June. So, yeah.
Here we are. We're off and running at this point.
Definitely.
All right. So here's where I want to start. And here's where I start a lot of my podcasts. I want to know where you were and what was going on in your world when you were in first grade.
First grade. Oh, a lot of things. I was the teacher's pet. My parents are both school teachers. My dad taught high school shop. My mom taught junior high English. So I was always reading. My first grade teacher actually even gave me a book and signed to the little girl I never got to teach how to read. And, I would read anything I could get my hands on. I actually even read, there was a Sesame Street Illustrated Children's Dictionary, and I read it cover to cover. It had little cartoons in it and little comic strips, but I literally read the dictionary because I just read everything I could get my hands on. And actually, one of the books I read was this book, I Want to Be a Pilot.
All right.
And I read the book and I'm like, oh, how hard could it be? I mean, it tells you right here, you pull back to go up and you push back to go down and you turn to go left and right. And, you just need to, let's see here. Yeah, you need to go to the doctor and get a medical.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this doesn't look too hard. And this looks pretty darn amazing. I think I want to do it. I want to be that guy there that everyone's saluting as he's going off to work. And I was like, that sounds awesome. But I also wanted to be 100 other things. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be all of that. Doctor won out because my parents told me, have you ever heard of a starving artist? And I said, yes. He said, have you ever heard of a starving doctor? And I said, no. They said, take that into consideration when making your job options. You can always do community theater, and I still do to this day. Actually, the Brookings Community Theater has a production of Mary Poppins going on this week, and I was the set designer and set builder for that. So I'm still involved with theater. I'm still acting. I'm still singing. I'm, doing all those fun things on the side. And I got to be a pilot, and I got to be a doctor. So all those dreams I had when I was in first grade came true.
So the little book, I Want to Be a Pilot, brought
Yeah.
it all together for you. Between that and what I have to imagine might have been a kind of cute, nerdy book with Sesame Street characters for somebody.
Yeah.
It was probably intended for people 3 and 4 years older than you as you were reading it, would be my guess. But hey, look, all those things kind of come together and bring us here. So when in your life, and you gave me some color, but
Mhm.
on I want to be a pilot, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an actor, I want to be in set design, I want to be all these things
Mhm.
that are equal part art and science and math, and you're clearly somebody who just loves to learn, loves to be in a place where there's knowledge to be gained and you can harvest it for yourself and live from it. But is there a point in your life where you really can point back to really knowing I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor, damn it. And this is the moment where it kind of it might have not been the okay, I'm going to med school, but it was like these
Mhm.
were the deep seeds were planted.
So when I was in about fourth or fifth grade, my mom got pretty sick. She was in and out of the hospital. She was, initially misdiagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. Then they decided it was lupus. But every time she went into the hospital, when I was there, the doctor would come in, they'd kick me out. They'd kick me out of the room. They didn't want me there until they knew what the doctor was going to say. And then they would tell me after he left what happened and what was going on. And I thought, if I'm a doctor, they can't kick me out. I will finally know what's going on. I will finally have some semblance of control of all of this. And I will know that they're not lying to me. Because my 10-year-old brain went to the worst case scenario of, she's dying and they're not telling me. Because I had a neighbor across the street who passed away from cancer when I was about 6 or 7. So that was still pretty fresh in my mind that someone can go from perfectly healthy to dead in a matter of 6 months because she had pancreatic cancer. It was very aggressive, and she went from normal to passing away in a very short order of time. And I thought, what are they not telling me? And the only way I can know for sure is if I am in the room when it happens and if I understand what all of this medical information is. So I have to know so I can feel secure.
Yeah, and the only in those two examples, your mom and your neighbor, the common denominator between healthy and unhealthy or death in your neighbor's case was the doctor in between, and
Mhm.
what's really going on there. So that's fascinating. Okay, so you graduate high school. Did you know when you graduated high school that it was on your to-do list to go to med school?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was everything, every extracurricular, every, shadowing experience. I started shadowing with almost all of my mom's specialists starting in high school. And my brother was an optometrist, and I shadowed with the ophthalmologist that he worked with. And that was the first time I passed out.
We can't let
Totally
that
embarrassed
go.
my
We can't
brother.
let that go. What?
Yeah. So he was doing an intraocular injection in the patient's eye, and I at least had the courtesy to wait until the needle was on the tray before I hit the floor. And I decided I'm not doing eyes. I want nothing to do with eyes.
Cross that specialty off the list. All
I
right.
crossed that one off. That decision was quite easy. But I did a lot of shadowing, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. In college, I did. I had a summer student practicum where students in the community could go in, and I shadowed with a nurse on the oncology ward. And then he found out that I wanted to be a doctor, so he basically farmed me out to anyone that was willing to take a student to shadow. So I was down in the ER. I got to watch a kidney transplant surgery. I got to spend a day with the social workers. I got to spend a day with the nurses. I got to watch a bone marrow transplant. So all of these experiences just led to me meeting some very important mentors that helped me not only get into med school, but then actually I did rotations with as a medical student later.
So you knew, I'm going to assume an age, but certainly probably even before you're a teenager or early teens, that you were going to become a physician. You were learning through what you could stomach, what types of medicine you were being called to, but you knew at a very early age, that's what you're going to do. Damn it. Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to Normal 40, the podcast. If you're here, it's probably not an algorithm or an accident. If you're here, it's probably you. And if you're here, I want to invite you to try something else. 2 years ago, I launched a community called The Insider. And when I created it, I thought it was going to be a coaching community where I could come in and teach. But what it's become over the last few months is something radically different. It's a place where we hang out, where we help one another, where we support one another, where people come in really skeptical that there's really a group of people like us doing things like this, and really skeptical if there's anything out there that can be helpful to them. And what they find after only a few calls is that we're really here, we really show up, there really are people in your corner, and that if you lean into it, it can change your life. I'm inviting you to be an insider. It might be the best decision of your lifetime. Go to normal40.com and you'll find The Insider, and I hope to see all of you on the inside. I love it. So you get into Baraboo and you get through residency. And where do you go after residency?
So after residency, I knew I wanted to basically kind of come back home. I wanted to get back to South Dakota. And in South Dakota, you either work basically for Sanford or for Avera. And Avera gave me that opportunity as a college student. So I said, I want to work for Avera. So that narrowed down my search to about 4 open positions. I think it was like Tyndall, Pierre, Brookings, and I don't remember, I think Winter or something. So I actually ended up in Tyndall and I worked there. So a town of 1,200 people. So it felt like, going to my family doctor when I was a kid. I did the hospital. I was the ER doc when they called, someone showed up in the ER, they'd call me and I'd go in and that's where, I spent my first 5 years in practice there doing everything, nursing home, being medical director for the ambulance. I was the chief of staff of, 2, but, and I did all of that. Yes.
So Tyndall, holy cow, I did not see that coming. And because a lot of people will have no idea where Tyndall is, we won't spend a lot of time talking about that, but Tyndall is, you got to be going to Tyndall to get to Tyndall. And it is, South Dakota is rural enough, and that is the most rural of rural South Dakota. So I had no idea they would even have a full-time physician in Tyndall.
Critical Access Hospital, I think our average hospital census was about 3 people. Yeah. So we'd send people down to Yankton or med flight up to Sioux Falls if something got serious. And I definitely cut my teeth those first 5 years there and learned a lot more than I think I even did in residency of how to, and I'm glad I had that rural residency to learn how to stand on my own 2 feet and be a doctor where there weren't tons of specialists around to refer to and ask for help, to literally be the only doctor in town on some weekends, to know that, I could handle whatever came in through those doors.
I want to get into your professional career where, and it happens for so many of us, where you've even articulated, you knew at a young age exactly what you wanted to do. You knew through the process the type of medicine you wanted to practice. You knew through the process where you wanted to practice medicine. And so you kind of always had this plan. And sometimes it wasn't easy, obvious, or free, but you were executing to this plan. And that describes not only most doctors, but it also describes attorneys and accountants and C-suite executives and just people who on whatever scale they measure themselves by, they have had success. And usually we get to this point at some stage of our success, and it gets awkwardly hard in ways that we can't often articulate and certainly can't see coming. And even if others would have warned us 5 or 6 years earlier that it was coming, we'd have told them they're crazy. Just like you thought the personality test for what type of doctor you would be crazy. It'd be the same kind of thing. If somebody would have told me, hey, look, you're going to reach this point where you're going to really be wrestling about, do you stay or do you go? I'm like, you're crazy. I'm just going to keep climbing. Did you have a point like that in your journey where it just got harder than you expected it to get?
I did. It really happened after I had my second child. So I had my first child there, and then in Tyndall, it was two doctors and two PAs. So you were either on call or a backup call for one of the PAs. And then I have this, newborn and a toddler. So I have a 2-year old and I've got a newborn, and I'm on call every other day. And something had to give. I was getting no sleep. I was exhausted. My whole life, it was just head down and push through, head down and push through when stuff got hard. And it got to the point where I couldn't put my head down and I couldn't push through anymore. And I was like, this is awful. I can't keep doing this. And my husband finally looked at me and he said, "You're killing yourself slowly. You either get a different job or get a different husband, because I'm not going to watch you do this." And I was like, oh, you're serious? Because he doesn't bluff. You call his bluff in cards or anything. He's serious. He's a straight shooter. And when he said, "You're killing yourself slowly, and I don't want to stand here and watch it," I really that was the wake up call that I needed. I said, okay, as much as I love rural medicine and as much as I love this, serving this community, I have to go somewhere where I can get a good night's sleep. And that means more colleagues, less call, bigger town, bigger practice. And it also came to the point where you realize that the job isn't necessarily going to love you back. You can love the job, but it won't love you back. Because no matter how much I gave or how late I'd stay up or how many times I would go in, there was always another patient. There was always another night of call. There was always another ER. There was always another ambulance. There was always another duty or meeting. And, the job would take as much as I would give it, and then a little bit more. And when I was in Tyndall, they had the doc that had been there years before. He had retired years before, but stayed in town. He passed away. And we went to his funeral, and it was at the Catholic church. Catholic church was huge. And I expected every row in that church to be full of grateful patients and mourners and people sad for the loss of life for this gentleman who served his community faithfully for 30, 40 years. And I looked around and it was pretty empty. I mean, his family was there. A few of us from the hospital were there, but the community wasn't. I mean, they named the pool after him, but I was like, wow, you can give your life to this community, literally. And when you're gone, the people that are mourning you are not your patients. I mean, they were sad they had to find another doctor, but they weren't there to mourn his passing. And I was like, well, maybe I need to find somewhere else. And it was hard because I thought everyone else has been able to do this. Why can't I? He was able to practice here for 40 years and he did just fine. Of course, he had a stay-at-home wife and who had dinner on the table every night, and he wasn't pregnant or breastfeeding or raising little kids. But I thought, God, there must be something wrong with me that I can't hack it. Why do I have to run away from this? And then I just had to remember, I either lose my husband and keep this community, or I leave to a bigger practice and keep my life and my family intact. And so that's when we moved to Brookings. So now my call went from 1 and 2 to 1 and 20. And all of a sudden this huge weight was lifted and I was able to pay back some of that sleep debt that I had been accumulating for years, and got back into community theater and got back into music and got busy with groups and, doing stuff with church and kids and realized that, the job will take as much as I give it, and I don't have to give it everything to be a good doctor.
How many doctors do you think have a story like yours? Where they work themselves to the place where they get to the place, and I'll go back to what I said earlier. You knew probably in single digits that you wanted to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. You set your sights on it. You got the grades, you did the work, you got into the undergrad, you got into med school, then you got the residency because you were brave enough to call and ask for hope. And you navigated your way there, and then you get this position in Tyndall, and you told the whole story. And you get to this place where, because you're successful, because you're resilient, because you survived med school, because you survived the attending who would tell you there's the only empty bed should be yours ever. All of these things. And then you see the people before you, as you so wonderfully articulated, they've done it. The people around you are doing it. Your situation is unique to yours, just like theirs is unique to them. But how many of them are afraid to say, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can muster it. And if I raise my hand and say, I don't think I can do this, I might lose what I have.
Oh, I can tell you it's a lot. I actually, coming kind of from that dark place, I learned a lot about physician burnout and actually helped form Avera's burnout program called the Light Program. And I was going around talking about it, trying to destigmatize it, because back in 2012, when I had my daughter, there wasn't even a term of burnout. No one talked about burnout. No one knew what it was. It was someone had burnout meant they couldn't hack it and they were weak and they shouldn't have been accepted into the program in the first place. And they should have left room for someone who was tougher. But I started going around and talking to people and trying to normalize this and saying, hey, this is real. This exists. It's not your fault. We've got to learn to take care of ourselves and put up reasonable boundaries and guardrails. And I did lots of speaking and talking, and there'd be so many people that would come up to me afterwards and say, hey, thank you so much. I was so ready to quit. Or actually, I had a couple of classmates who've actually committed suicide, and they say about 200 physicians commit suicide a year. So that's my med school class. That's one med school class gone every year to suicide. So I know that's a very common story with physicians, of being so engrossed into that identity and trying to keep up that facade that when it finally cracks or breaks, something serious happens. You either change jobs or you find healthy coping strategies to deal with it, which is what Light was trying to do, is teach people you need to reach out for help. You need to ask for help. This is not anything you should have to deal with alone. To people doing things that are detrimental to their health, their finances, their marriages. That's why there's physicians dealing with alcohol and drugs and divorce and suicide, all because they're just trying so hard to hold on, and you've been conditioned that you're invincible. And so what happens when there's a chink in that armor and you're afraid to share it with anyone because you're afraid they're going to pounce on you? Because a lot of doctors have some pretty hefty imposter syndrome. You're just keep waiting for someone to notice that you're not as brilliant as everyone thinks you are, and they made a mistake letting you in. Because you walk in that room, you go from being the smartest person in your high school to being one of the top people in your college, and then you get to med school, and they told us, for the first time in your life, 50% of you will be in the bottom half of your class. I was like, oh, it's not going to be me.
That's math. Yeah.
That's math. 50% of us were suddenly in the bottom half of the class for the first time in our life. And that was, it shakes you to the core. And you're like, well, what else do I believe about myself that could be wrong? Maybe I am not that amazing or great.
So in my journey, I've accidentally kind of unearthed this following of physicians. I mean, it's why you and I are talking. And I do free rambles where you can just go in and book a conversation with me. And it's to the point where on some weeks, 50% of the people I talk to are doctors who haven't told anyone what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, what they're going through. And they show up to me for a few reasons. One, because I'm not a doctor. I don't know their boss. I don't know their practice. I don't know the intimate details, but yet I'm somebody who's been where they are, not in a medical setting, but in a professional setting. And I've helped people navigate that. And I've helped people just kind of open up and talk about it. But there's some things I've learned about doctors, and you just hit on one, and that is all of them go into med school knowing this isn't bad. I'm not trying to spin this in a negative set, but they're believing that they're smart. You just said, well, 50% of you are going to be in the lower tier of the class. And so they go in with all of this emotional, and their grandma's happy and their parents are proud, and they go into all this with this baggage that they don't even know is baggage yet. It's not baggage yet. It's support at the time. And they go into it and, to prove how smart they are. Look this way. And by the time they're done, they're really, a certain percentage of them are actually trying to prove they're actually not stupid. It's
Oh,
almost the
yeah.
same thing, but completely different mentally. It's like, well, I've got to do this to prove to grandma and mom and everybody I told I was going to do this, who said I should do this, and I told I could do this. I got to prove to them that this is still what I want. This is still what I'm capable of, that I am wired to do this. And if they can do it, I can do it. And that is admirable up to an extent. And it's deadly, to your point that you've made very specifically, to goes to the extreme. And so what I've discovered is that if I can just find a place for people to just talk, just share, just be this outlet, that even that lets just a little bit of pressure out of their head, out of their gut, out of their chest, this pressure that they walk into the ER with or walk. And the worst actually are people who are in critical care, because all they do is react to emergencies all day long, and they are never off the clock, and they're always just react. And so but just having a simple conversation with somebody is the first step in what becomes a longer part of the journey for many of them. But it's hard for me I'm not a doctor. I'm a healthcare consumer. You are my physician. So it's hard for me to hear physicians, who, by the way, we all do kind of hold in a certain esteem, be subject to a culture that expects them to endure this. It's, as a healthcare consumer, I don't want my physicians to have to work a 30-hour shift, to give up their nights, to give up weekends. But yet that's the system we've got. We don't need to go down that tangent. I'm just coming back to this place where I talk every day to physicians who have no idea where to turn, no idea who to talk to. And I want you, since you have been so instrumental, especially regionally throughout South Dakota, what's that doctor? And there's going to be a lot of physicians listening, like, okay, she just described me this small town story about the dude who passed away, and they had the decency to name a pool after him. Wait a minute. I want more than that out of my life. And I'm feeling all of these things. I'm feeling the pressure, and I have nowhere to turn. I don't know who to talk to that feels safe. I'm drinking more on a Tuesday night than I wish I was. My relationship with my spouse is a 2 of 10. And on some days that's a good estimate. And I don't really have any friends. I've got a few buddies that I can hang out with and have a few beers with, but they don't really know what's going on. I can't trust them with this information. I'm sitting here, I'm listening to this conversation. I'm about ready to explode. What do you tell them to do?
Yeah, honestly, that's where coaching comes in. That's what I ended up having to do when I was on maternity leave. I was like, I got to come up with something. And I just Googled physician burnout and found a coach that was a physician who dealt with physicians dealing with this. And he understood what was going on and gave me the space to ask the hard questions, and gave me the space to say, what is it that I really do want? And permission to dream about what would work for me, not what would work for everybody else. And there's a big stigma for doctors seeking out mental health, because I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but on a lot of your medical license, when you're applying every year, there's a checkbox. And thankfully, this just got removed from South Dakota, but there used to be a box saying, are you depressed? Or have you been treated for depression? Or any mental health condition. So if you're afraid, if you checked yes on that, are you going to get a call from the medical board suspending your license or making you go through this whole proctoring process? Or are they going to watch you? So telling someone, well, you need to get on an antidepressant and see a counselor. They're like, no, I'm not going to risk it. And a lot of times I think counseling works on looking back and looking for pathology, where I feel like coaching is looking forward. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And how are you going to get there? It doesn't say, tell me about how your mother messed up your life, and let's talk about all the things that made you sad. Let's talk. And coaches, where do you want to be and how are you going to get there? And that's not reportable. That's not reportable to medical, because that's not counseling. It's not healthcare. But I think it's just as powerful. Now, some people, do they need medications? Yes. Do they need treatment? Yes. Do they need to see a counselor or have the trifecta of all three: medications with a physician, seeing a psychiatrist, seeing a counselor, and using a coach? That would be knock it out of the park. But, when you're in those early stages, I think a coach is just a good way to get that wake up call to say, where do I want to be? And if it's not here, then where? Because, it's very easy to say, I don't want this. Well, what do you want then? I don't know. No one's ever asked me that. I went to the med school that accepted me. I went to the residency where I matched, and I went to the first job that gave me an offer. That's most doctors. We're not used to being in control of making decisions about our life. We make decisions about other people's lives. Take this medicine, do this treatment, have this test. But when it comes to us, introspection, we're crap.
Hey everyone, thank you once again for listening to Normal 40, the podcast. Look, there's a reason why this podcast is going to get downloaded thousands of times. And there's a reason why thousands of people show up to what I write and what we share. And there's a reason why hundreds of you join me on The Insider. The Insider is a community that I thought was going to be a place for me to show up and teach and coach. But what it's become is a fan base for people who are ready to get started. It's a place to connect to the people you're going to need for the best decade of your life. And it's the most affordable community, most valued community that I can offer. And I show up in there at least twice a month. And we do live events and have special guests. And I even record podcasts in there from time to time. So look, go to normal40.com, join the Insider, check it out for yourself, and do yourself a favor. Let's be up to something. All right, I'm going to get back to the podcast. So well said. I see it all the time. One of my clients, first name is Kirk. He's a physician. And he told me the same story about mental health. He said, I can have somebody come in with all of my symptoms and I can prescribe him things that help that patient and they're better. They get better in 3 months or 6 months. And I know I've healed them, but I can't get the same help for me because I feel like it will damage my ability to perform, to have my practice, keep my medical certificate. Mm-hmm. So I have to box this in. I have to hold it in. I have to not even accept the same treatment that I prescribe to people who need it, and it works. And so his whole mission, he's right, this exact perspective. So what do you want to do about that? This is, like I said, he's a client of mine. And he is going down the path of, I don't want to say too much, but he is going down the path of solving that problem creatively for physicians and also pilots, ironically, because pilots kind of have the same thing. If you have a mental health concern as a pilot, guess what? Where does the FAA come down on that? So there's these certain professions that even though there's usable, diagnosable, and solvable problems through healthcare, because you asked for help, you've identified, hey, I think I could use some help here. You get through the stigma, you ask for help, and you can improve. But these same professions have to hide from it. And his whole thing, he's also a pilot, by the way, his whole thing is, this is baloney. I'm going to fix it. And I'm going to create a system and a place where people can come get the help they need and nobody needs to know about it. And so there's obviously that's cryptic in nature, not like he's not violating the law. That isn't the spirit of that conversation. It's just that when you brought up a couple of things, getting help for people who need it, having access to it when you need it, the fear of not being able to receive it when you need it, and then having to hide from it. And coaches help you look forward. Where do you want to go forward? My conversation with him is, he is getting impassioned about, I want to solve this problem. So all the doctors that he could never possibly meet might benefit from the work that he did, trying to make it okay to not be okay. And that's where he's going on his journey going forward to try to help solve this problem. Same with alcoholism. Try to be a doctor who's saying, hey, look, I got a problem with alcohol. I need to go to some sessions. No, you can't do that. So what do? You just be a little bit more secretive about when you're drinking. You're just a human. So look, I get it. I feel doctors have a unique set of challenges as it relates to burnout. Let's put a bow on this for this conversation. And let's go back to the question I asked last time. So when it's like that person, hire a coach, great. Can they reach out to you? Would you take a call from somebody who just wants to say, I need to talk to somebody. You've been there, heard the podcast. Just help me think through what I can do. What do you prescribe to people, doctor or not, about, okay, you're at this place. What do I do next?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't. I've talked with a lot of pre-med students and med students and classmates, but never officially. I've done some, when I was working with Building the Light program, I did a little bit of coach training and I never finished the certification. But I've worked with a lot of really good coaches and a lot of and there's a lot of physician coaches out there. I'd be willing to talk to anyone. Yeah, I'm always ears. And the one thing, in the medical community, it says if you go into a room of doctors and you say the patient comes and you pause, you're going to hear everyone chime in first. And then you say the doctor comes and you pause, everyone's going to say last. And what I would teach when I was doing my seminars and talking to people about burnout with the Light program was I brought it into a medical analogy. And I'm sitting in a room with over 100 female physicians in it. And I said, hey, where does the blood that leaves the heart go to first? What organ does the heart feed first? And I'm getting, they're thrown. The cardiologists are laughing because they know where I'm going with this. But some people are like, does it go to the brain first? It goes up through the carotids to the brain. Or maybe it goes to the lungs first. I don't know. Does it go to the skin, the kidneys? And I was like, no. The very first blood vessel that branches off the aorta is the coronary artery. The heart feeds itself first. And you as a doctor need to learn to feed yourself first. And I said, no one's ever called the heart a selfish organ. It pumps all day, every day. It never stops. It keeps the rest of the body alive. But if one of those coronary arteries were to block off, you know what that's called? That's called a heart attack. That's called an MI. That part of the heart's going to die that's not getting blood to it. And, I always say burnout is kind of like angina. And that's where those vessels spasm and the heart just isn't getting enough blood. But it's not enough to make someone stop. It may make them pause. But, burnout's the angina. And you got to do it before you have that heart attack. And, you really damage the heart and it becomes irreparable. And that finally clicked because everyone's heard the analogy, put your oxygen mask on first. Well, I've been in lots of planes and I've never seen the oxygen mask fall. And I still think I could probably get it on my kid before I got it on me. Even though I know theoretically I would pass out within a matter of seconds. I still think I could beat it. And everyone does too. So the whole put your oxygen mask on first analogy falls flat. But when I was in a room of doctors saying, what does the heart feed first? Then it finally clicked. And they're like, oh yeah, heart's not selfish. Heart takes care of everybody, but it takes care of itself first. And that completely is a change in paradigm from what we were trained and taught.
Well, Dr. Kruse, I think we're going to leave it right there. That's the perfect place to end this. So thank you so much for taking time to visit with us and sharing your story and perspective on burnout and change and really getting clarity on what it is that fills you up. And so hats off to your husband for forcing the hard decision, the awkward conversation, as I call it. My wife had one with me. My wife had the awkward conversation with me that finally pushed me into this place of, you're right, I need to make a change. And so when you're blessed enough to have that, listen to it. And if you're not blessed enough to have that, listen to the people around you who can help you because they're telling you for a reason. They're telling you for a reason. So thanks for being here. And is there anything else you need to leave us with before we go?
I think I've imparted all the wisdom I can.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for being here. And I'll see you on the podcast.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.